everybody's on.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you're out there listening, and I think we need to get everybody off listen-only mode. Or, yeah, well, are we going to do that now or later? We'll try to take everybody off listen-only mode so that you can let us know you're here. So if you just give us 1 second. Okay, I think people are off listen-only mode, so good morning again. This is Heather Himmelberger. I'm the director of the Southwest Environmental Finance Center, and I have James Markham here with me helping with the logistics of the webinar. And then from Vermont, we have Allison Murphy and Jim Siriano. And if we could go around and introduce yourself if you're on the phone today from one of the utilities.
Martha Harrison from the West Windsor Mountain Water System.
Great, welcome.
Frank Heald and Chuck Craig from Ludlow.
Great, welcome. Do we have anybody else? Okay, well, I think we're expecting Keith from Bethel. So we'll go ahead and get started, and maybe he'll join us in a little bit, just because I know everybody's time is precious and we want to be conscious of your time. So just a little bit of logistics. We don't need quite as much today. Oh, Keith, did you join us? Oh. Well, it looked like Keith might have signed on, so he might be joining us. We don't need quite as much logistics today because everybody should be able to speak. But just in case, there is a control panel at the top right corner of your screen. The little orange arrow allows you to minimize and maximize that control panel. If you want to mute yourself, you can use the green microphone button. It'll probably show up green on your screen. That will allow you to control muting and unmuting, because we don't want everybody in listen-only mode this time, because we want you to be able to talk to each other and share information. And then there should be an attendee list, and you can type in questions, but because we don't have you in listen-only mode, you should be able to speak verbally your questions, so you shouldn't have to use the box, but if you want to, that's okay, or if you need to send us a message, you can use a chat box. So I just wanted to spend just a couple of minutes just refreshing our memory about what asset management is before we get started. Again, we talked about the 5 core components of asset management. The first being the current state of the assets. This is what we spent a lot of our first class on, where we talked about getting a handle on what you own, developing an inventory, looking at where assets were located, what condition they were in, their useful life, their replacement costs, so that once you have a handle on what you own, it helps you better manage that. The second piece, which was our second class, was looking at level of service and setting goals for what we want to provide our customers. Our third class, we talked about criticality. So in criticality, we looked at what was the probability of failure and the consequence of failure, and how we ranked our probability from, say, 1 to 5, with 1 being a low probability of failure, 5 being high, and our consequence of failure being 1 to 5, with a 1 being a low consequence and 5 being high. And then those assets that were in this box would be ones that had a high probability of failure and a high consequence of failure, so they would be the riskiest assets for us. We also started talking about life cycle costing in Class 3. We looked at the operation and maintenance side of our assets. So how do you want to operate, maintain your assets going forward? What kind of maintenance tasks could you do? What schedule you wanted to do them on, developing an O&M plan, that sort of thing. And then Class 4, we did the rest of life cycle costing, which is looking at your repair replacement schedule, what kind of schedule you want to replace things on, looking longer term at our assets rather than just what we have to do in the next, say, 5 years or 10 years, but looking out much further, 20, 50, 100 years. And then finally, the last part of asset management is the funding. So how are you going to fund your day-to-day activities, your day-to-day operation, and then how are you going to fund major replacement projects, major capital expenditures? So on the report out, which is really the main purpose of today's webinar, is just to get you a chance to talk about what you did with the last asset management applied activity. But it also is to give you a chance to talk about the overall process, what you've done since our last class in November. So where you are with your asset management program. We talked yesterday to the folks in Montpelier, and many of them have gone much beyond just what they did in class and have expanded their asset management program. So you can talk about anything you've done, post-class, other assets that you might have included, anything like that. And just as a reminder of what we were doing in our Asset Management Applied Activity Workshop 4, was we were looking at the assets that we included in our inventory and looking at them by class and saying, did those types of assets have repair options, rehabilitation options, or replacement options? Because sometimes a particular class of asset may have one, two, or all three of those, and it's important to know what types of interventions we can make in our assets. And then we were looking at, for the next part, developing sort of a short and long-term asset replacement need. So we had a table where we're looking at the asset, what the criticality was, what the date of anticipated replacement was, whether it was going to be in the short-term replacement period, meaning in the next 10 years, or whether it was in the long-term replacement period, more than 10 years. And then an estimate of its estimated replacement cost. And then based on that data from that table, you could generate a capital improvement plan looking at what were all the items that needed to be done in year 1, what were all the items that would need to be done in year 2, year 3, etc., and adding up the total estimated replacement costs for each of those items per year and be able to put together a longer-term replacement schedule. And then after that, we wanted to look at what was the need for funding. How would you present that need to your board? How would you go forward? What would you share with them? What kinds of information? How would you share it? And then finally, just our normal questions about if you had any difficulties or any successes or positive outcomes with the process. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I'd just like to open it up to you all to have a chance to share what you did.
We can't change that part. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Just as a reminder, nobody's
on. I don't
on.
want to carry this out for 3 months either. Oh, if that works better, I don't know. It's up to you. Well, if you want to bother to do it that way, go ahead. Hello?
Hello, is that you, Keith?
It is, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Just a reminder, we don't have people on listen-only mode right now because we wanted people to be able to share. So welcome. Thanks for joining us today. So we have Martha and Charles and Frank also on the line. So I wanted to open it up at this point and ask for a volunteer to go first and talk about what you did since our last class and how things are going with the asset management program. Anybody want to volunteer to be our first report out person?
Oh, I always like to start.
All right, you go for it.
We're also working this the grant activity on
Mhm.
the water side. So we've done the mapping. We corrected mapping, and we did a inventory of all the fire hydrants and which way they turn on or off. And we went through and did a condition assessment based primarily on age relative to the distribution lines. So we have all that now in spreadsheet form, and we're working on the criticality part of it as we speak now, I think, which is one of the last deliverables on the grant program itself.
Okay.
That's where we are right now. I didn't get a chance to do any of the actual applied activity for. It's been too busy around here with town meeting and everything. So that's
In
where
terms
we
of
are.
the
We're about 3/4 of the way through the grant on the water side, and seem to be progressing pretty well with that.
On the criticality, have you been using the ranking, the 1 to 5 ranking, or did you use something different?
I think we're looking at 1 to 5, right?
Okay, and have you got any results yet? I mean, how many hydrants do you have that you think are critical? You know, you're finding
Well,
a
we have a
lot in that
couple that
category?
we know don't work, so those are critical. We're trying to replace two a season
Okay.
going forward, so that's what we're going to try to work that into based on the inventory that we have now of all of the hydrants.
Okay. And then how many approximately do you have? Do you know in your system?
About 30.
Okay. So you're looking at about a 15-year cycle to replace them
Right.
all. Is that about right? Okay. And where do you see your program going? How do you see it moving forward from here? Like after you get the criticality, you've talked about doing 2 per season. Do you have any thoughts of, you know, any other
Well,
activities you plan on doing?
in the interim, while this has been going on, we had our storage tanks were inspected internally. You know, we went through the 5-year inspection period, and our older storage tank is in need of a substantial amount of work. So we're trying to plan for that, and we also need to add telemetry to both our storage tanks.
Okay. Okay. All right.
And all of
Does
our
any,
valves are mapped on the new map sheets too, as well. So
you said all your valves are mapped?
yeah.
Okay. And your pipes as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then what kind of
Exactly
mapping did
know
you
what's
do?
there.
Did you do like a GIS map, or is it something simpler, or
It's basically a GIS map.
okay. And will you have in-house capabilities to use it, or is that something that you'll end up contracting out if you need to make
Well,
changes?
we don't do GIS in-house because we just don't have the systems for it. So probably any work we do with that will be done through our engineers.
Okay. Okay. And I would suggest, going forward, just a suggestion is figure out a way to keep track of what changes you want to make, because I assume you won't be calling the engineer like every time you want to make a change. You
No,
probably
no.
collect them all up and do it, you know, maybe once every 6 months or once a year or whatever time frame makes sense to you. So you might want to find some process of, you know, how do you keep track of those changes? Are they
Right. Some of those we can probably do internally, but we'll work closely with them on this as well.
Yeah, because it's something that ends up being often sort of a missing piece, that as people get a map, they forget that keeping it up to date is critically important. So you find out something's wrong because invariably you'll have mistakes. I mean, it's just a guarantee. So as you find out it's wrong, you know, making sure that eventually that gets corrected on the map is a really important component. So some kind of procedure, whatever that is, whatever works best for you,
Right.
you'll want to develop for the mapping. Okay, anybody have any questions for Keith?
Plowing any snow, Keith?
I had enough of it really, but we're wading through it as usual.
Yeah.
We've already overdone our salt budget, so there we go there. So trying to do all this and then try to keep track of daily operations is a pain in the butt, but we're managing.
I probably shouldn't share with you that we had 1 inch of snow in January and it shut the entire city down.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, they shut down all the schools. They shut down the university, so we had a day off work. They shut, everybody just stayed in place, and literally it was 1 inch of snow. That's all we had, and it was probably gone by about, I don't know, 10, 11.
Sure. A snow day in New Mexico, that's great.
Yeah, that's kind of our version of a snow day.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, there's white stuff on the ground. What do we do? Any other questions for Keith? All right, thank you very much. Who wants to go next?
Well, if you're ready, we can take a shot at it from Ludlow.
We're ready. Go for it.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you and the state for doing this. We have used these classes largely as educational tools. We were in the process and have continued. We've been taking these on a large evaluation of our wastewater collection and processing systems. Some of our equipment dates back to the original date of 1967, and some of the parts and pieces are original. We're working with an asset management grant that will map and evaluate our collection system. We've identified some short-term issues that need to be addressed in the collection system, manholes and lines. We have a water and sewer project on one street that we've been working on. They're too small to provide fire protection, and the sewer is pretty much infested with roots. We have a rural development application in process on that particular area. We will be hopefully some collection system upgrades using cash in-house. Upgrades to the wastewater treatment are approaching the $2 million range, and we'll be evaluating using the processes that we've talked about with these 4 classes, but we'll be using that process to phase probably the financing is the most critical issue, but phase the financing to complete the upgrades over the next 1 to 5 years.
Great. And do you have any sense for like the magnitude? Is it going to be about $2 million per year, or do you think it's going to be a different amount as you phase it over that 1 to 5 years?
Really don't have a handle. The base wastewater treatment plant upgrades are just under $2 million.
Okay.
The collection system evaluation is still kind of in the planning stage. We don't really have a good number on it yet.
Okay.
Mike probably will spend $500,000 over that 1 to 5 years on the collection system.
Okay. Okay. And then did you say that some of your wastewater dates back to, did I hear right, 1867?
No. 1967.
I was going to say, I was like, did I hear that right? Because I heard an 18. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you'd even be doing wastewater back then. Okay. That makes a little difference.
The existing plant dates from 1967, and there's been numerous upgrades over the ensuing period, but there are a few parts and pieces that are original. So
Okay.
all of that is, and that we've all done. been working with an engineer for about 9 months, evaluating each and every piece of that system.
Yeah, and I think if some of your pieces have been there since '67, you've got a pretty good life out of those, and probably ready for some replacements at that point. That's a pretty good lifespan.
Well, and then of course there's new issues that we find in the regulatory process that need to be accommodated also. So.
Exactly. And are you using the criticality analysis to help you decide what goes in what phases? Have you been using that part of the asset management?
We really haven't reached that point yet.
Okay. Because that's, like, as you're phasing, that's a really good part of how to figure out how to phase things, you know, doing the most critical things in phase 1 and then, you know, going down the ranks. Because if you're phasing it, even over a 5-year period, you want to be careful that you're doing the most critical things in year 1 so that they're not having to wait until year 5 and then something might go wrong, you know, in those years before you get to it. So that's a really good process to build into your phasing, just to make sure that, you know, the ones that are super high risk are the ones that are in year 1, and, you know, just below that would be year 2, down to the ones that, you know, they probably would still be reasonably high risk in year 5, but, you know, as you get lower and lower in risk, you know, that's the stuff you want to wait to year 5. So, you know, I highly recommend you look at that process as part of how you want to phase this, and, you know, figure out your most critical needs and that kind of thing.
Well, the important thing to consider through that process is not only the criticality, but how it gets paid for.
Yes.
In small towns, you really don't like to go to the well many times.
Mm-hmm.
What we need is basically shovel ready, so that we either go for a large pot of financing and construction over 2 or 3 years, and again, criticality and expediency would dictate when you do what piece. But the plant itself, probably that would take place over a couple of construction summers.
Mm-hmm.
And do it all in one financing piece as opposed to much involved with obtaining financing that you may as well get it all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, as opposed to having to complete the same paperwork over and over again.
Over and over again. Convince them once and do it all.
Exactly. Any questions for Ludlow?
Well, this isn't related to what Frank was talking about, but I remember in one of the earlier workshops, Ludlow had these fantastic maps showing all their curb stops and everything. And I just wanted to, we're going to be having some mapping done, and I wondered, did they do that internally? Did they hire someone? Was it expensive?
We actually teamed up with our engineers on that.
Uh-huh.
They did some orthophoto mapping, and then in-house we actually helped them locate all of our infrastructure and get the measurements and ties.
Uh-huh. So did you have to do the GPS portion yourself?
We did not. Our engineers did all that.
Okay.
Project that they.
And do you know, did they do like survey grade GPS, like the super accurate, or did they do like a level up where it's maybe a little cheaper but a little bit less accurate? Do you know which way they went?
I can't say.
Okay.
I'd say within 2 feet on a GPS is probably pretty accurate.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the survey grade. The survey grade, which is usually super expensive, that's why I was wondering, is like I think they're like centimeter accuracy or something. I mean, they're like spot on, but it's like super expensive equipment, and usually they charge a lot more. That's why I was curious. But typical, a couple of feet, 1 to 3 feet would be like the next level up. So it wouldn't be survey grade, but it would be, fairly accurate. So it sounds like that's the level they went. So that would help a little bit with cost, because I know that it is much more expensive if you do that super, super accurate.
I think the level of accuracy they provided is fine for us and our locating equipment.
Yeah, I would think so.
Should never have any trouble finding what's mapped.
Do you remember how much it cost?
I don't know.
No.
Okay.
Was that something that they built into a bigger project, or did you hire them specifically just, to make a map?
That was really the culmination of a large water system upgrade that we did 5 years ago. We had a tank and distribution, or a tank and transmission system upgrade, shovel ready for the Obama era monies.
Mm-hmm.
And the mapping came at the tail end of that and kind of got just shoveled into that project, so I don't remember how much it was.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Martha, this is Jim Soriano talking. What kind of mapping is being done regarding the improvement project you all are doing? I mean, there should be at least some as-builts on that could be used to help develop a map, even if it needed to be ground truth in the future.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get as-built, but we also just got a proposal from our engineers for mapping and a hydraulic study and a long-range plan. And I asked them, if they're going to include curb stops in there. That wasn't their plan, but I'm just wondering, if that would be prohibitively expensive to add that in.
Hmm. I mean,
They're out there taking other points. I can't imagine that they're going to charge you, or that they should. Let's say, I won't say they won't. But if they're out there in the field taking lots of other points, it shouldn't be that much more difficult for them. Like if you had somebody going with them to help locate the curb stops and all they were doing is taking the points, it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Right, okay.
Yeah, locating them would be the bigger issue.
Right.
The more time-consuming issue, potentially. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure if I was going to ask something reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely ask them, and I think if you would offer that, your guys or whoever, I don't know who you have that could help locate the curb stops, but if you guys do that part, it shouldn't be that hard for them to just take the extra point.
Right.
Because that's not that difficult, and especially if you're out there doing field work, it shouldn't take that much longer.
Right.
It's the location that takes a little bit more time. And it would be so helpful for you to have those that it would definitely be worth checking into, because it would definitely be, something that you would want to have on your map.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
My highest recommendation is that be part of your mapping.
Yeah. Okay.
Having looked for a curb stop in the middle of the winter with ice on top, strongly suggest finding summertime.
Right.
It's a thing that, every time you look for them, if they're not on the map, you'll be saying, oh my gosh, why didn't I put this?
Right. Yeah, might as well get as much as we can on there.
Yeah, and you may want to look at cutting in another area if you have to make a cut somewhere else. Maybe there's somewhere that you can cut something else to get that, not on the mapping, but some other activity they're doing. Maybe there's some trade-offs you can do, but typically the expense is getting them out there, getting the equipment in their hands. So, once they're out there, getting extra points, like I said, that shouldn't be a huge, big deal.
Right.
Because it's the time to walk around the system and take the points and that sort of thing. And when you download the data, it all sort of downloads at once, and it puts it on the map. So, none of those things should actually be that much more difficult if there's more points.
Right.
And then your folks could ground truth the maps afterwards. You could save that effort of, just, if you wanted to take the map that they made and ground truth and make sure everything was falling in the right place, that could save that expense if you guys did that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone.
Are they going to include the valves and hydrants and all that stuff?
Yes. Yep. They were the only thing they weren't going to include was the curb stops. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I think, as Frank and Chuck were saying, I think that's something you would really miss. You would really be sorry you didn't get it. So, whatever you can do.
Right. Okay.
Give it your best shot.
Yeah.
And Frank, did you guys look at using SRF as well as RD, and how did you make the choice to use the rural development funding, or did you just look at rural development, or how did you come to that financing choice?
That's a jolly good question, I guess. I think because, well, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think my way through it. There apparently, seemingly, there's some RD money that is easily available, according to our engineering firm. And I think we just went with that application first.
Okay.
We'll have plenty of project to spread it around before it's done.
Yeah, I mean, you might, I'm not saying one is better than the other or anything like that, but just, you might have them check out the SRF just as another option to see, because it is sort of an apples and oranges comparison, because there are different interest rates over different periods of time and different combinations of, sometimes RD has loan grant combos, but it's a longer payback period over a higher interest rate, and so it's not an easy comparison always, because there's big differences between payback periods and that sort of thing, but it's something to have them look at in future projects to say, well, what would be the overall impact of doing, this kind of funding versus that kind of funding? What's the total payback period? What's the monthly or yearly payback? Just so you have all the information and you can decide which one works best for you. And it sounded like you're doing a lot of pipeline, which works well with the longer payback periods. Sometimes treatment assets, it's a little harder with the longer payback periods because the assets may reach the end of their useful life before you reach the end of the payback. So those are things we kind of look at sometimes, is which types of assets are you doing with the longer payback. So just something to think about as you move forward. What kind of funding sources are out there and how they impact you positively or negatively with their different funding arrangements.
We also got quite a bit of grant funding in West Windsor for our sewer project, and a part of that was disaster relief funding, community development block grant disaster relief.
Okay.
And I know Ludlow has a lot of floodplain. I don't know if that would help you out.
Yeah, the CDBG funding is great because it is all grant.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but you don't have to pay it back, so that's the good part.
Yeah, exactly. You can't complain about that. Okay, anything else for Ludlow?
I think we're good. Thank you.
All right, so Martha, you're up.
Okay, well, I've been doing distribution pipes the whole time, and as I think I've mentioned, we are doing a major improvement project due to the fire in the base lodge and our subsequent acquisition of the water system.
No.
So we have a couple new lengths of pipe that are in obviously excellent shape because they're new. The rest of the distribution piping was put in around 1985. So what I've seen as I've looked through the materials that have been handed out in the workshop is that the useful life is 50 to 80 years, depending, on what type of pipe it is. And, so I put I mean, as far as repair, rehab, and replacement, of course, it can be repaired, and that would probably be the best option unless there are multiple repairs to the same section of pipe over a period of time and starts to get prohibitively expensive to repair. But I figured we probably wouldn't look to replace it until 2034 or possibly later than that. I looked at the cost of the pipe that we just put in, which was around $75 per linear foot installed. And the amount of old pipe we have is about 10,000 linear feet. So in today's dollars, it would be $750,000, but when you're looking out 17 plus years, I just assumed a 3% inflation rate, which who knows, but that would make
it's
the cost.
It's as good a guess as any.
That would make the cost in 2034 $1,237,500.
Okay.
Which, that's a lot of money, and that's just one asset class. So, I don't know if it's always a good idea. In order to have that in hand, we'd have to set aside $72,800 a year between now and then, and I don't know how realistic that is and how desirable it is to have it all on hand, or if it would make sense to maybe set aside half of it with the plan to borrow the other half when you get there. So I'd be interested to hear anyone's opinion on that.
One thing I will say is your cost on a mile basis is actually pretty good. You just running the numbers of 75, it's around 400,000 per mile, which is very low. So that's a good thing. Your cost, you got a very good cost, because a lot of times it's more of 500,000 to 750,000 a mile. So you did real well cost-wise. And then you may find that your pipe will last longer. I mean, who knows? It's some of our pipes that we're seeing lasting 100 years. I mean, it kind of just depends on your experience. So 50 to 80 is a decent guess, but sometimes they last longer. So when you look at how much you might have to put aside, I kind of agree with you that you probably are not looking at putting aside the entire amount over that period, because a lot of times those funds get robbed for other purposes. When big amounts of money sit around, people get antsy about it. But I think putting aside some of it would be very worthwhile to you, because if you have, say, a major problem somewhere, like you might have enough money to do a portion of your system, or you would have a really good down payment for, if you went for a loan. So I think finding a comfortable level where you're putting some of that money aside for that pipe replacement, and you're, putting in a reserve account of some type that, will have some of the replacement dollars available to you, but maybe not the entire 1.2 million, because presumably there'll be other funding sources of some kind, whether it's SRF or RD or CDBG or anything, presumably there will be some kind of funding sources in the future. I mean, I don't ever picture water and wastewater systems being 100% completely self-supporting with no outside funding. I mean, I just don't see that as a practical option going forward. So, there should be some kind of, funders that you could go to. So it's probably a good conversation to have, is like, what level do we want to set aside to maybe pay for some replacement if a portion needs to be replaced, or, to not have to take as big a loan, in 2037 or 2034.
Yeah, that would be like the earlier end of when we would need to replace it.
Yeah. And so again, the longer it lasts, the less money you need per year as well. So if your pipe actually lasts a little longer. I don't recall, what kind of pipe, what type of pipe do you have in your system?
It's PVC.
Okay.
Blue Brute.
Okay. And we're still sort of waiting to see because we haven't really hit the end of the useful life of PVC yet. So we don't really know. We could find out that it lasts, you know, incredibly long, or we could find out that it all goes bad all at once. I mean, we just don't know. And I'm always sort of a little bit hesitant to say, because every time we think we have the greatest pipe in the world, we find out some flaw.
Right.
You know, it always seems like you find the great thing and then it's like, oops, AC pipe was great, until we found out maybe asbestos wasn't so good. So we just never know, but I think it's reasonable to say that it would last at least, you know, till the 2034, and then maybe it goes beyond that. And obviously you don't have to replace it until it actually causes you problems. And
Right.
as you mentioned, the pipe is one area where repairs are generally so much cheaper than replacement that you can make a lot of repairs before you've actually paid for the cost of the pipe. So until you start getting like repair after repair after repair, you know, you can let it go for quite a while before you have to do anything about it.
Right.
You also, Martha, would want to consider the other asset classes and, you know, your shorter term assets, because those are the things you probably want to focus funding in terms of reserves with, as opposed to something that, you know, might not be needed for 20 or 30 years.
Right. Yeah, and as I said, our engineers are gonna be doing a long-range plan with us. So, you know, we'll take everything into consideration together and do that criticality analysis and prioritize, you know, what needs to be done first.
How long are they looking out for when they talk about long range? How long are they considering?
I haven't asked them that. I'll ask them. I was thinking 20 years, but I have no idea, so I'll ask them that.
Yeah, you should definitely find out what they mean, because different people mean different amounts of time with a long-range plan. So definitely ask them, and you would want at least 20 years, but maybe even some less accurate, if you will, information going beyond, like just kind of include a ballpark for what would happen 30, 40, 50 years down the road. Again, just to kind of give you that idea of immediate, like short term in the next 10 years should be reasonably accurate. 10 to 20 years would be sort of moderate accuracy, and then beyond 20 years it, you know, gets to be a little iffy, but at least it's telling you, hey, you know, you got pipe in 2034 that you might have to think about, or you got something else, a bunch of hydrants you have to replace in 2050, or whatever it is, so that you kind of have a little bit of thought about what's going to go on, you know, longer term. So just ask them what they mean by long term, and see if there's a way to get, you know, maybe even a 50-year look, with the accuracy at level again being a lot lower for the 21 to 50. But, you know, just talk to them about that, because you want to make sure that it is looking, you know, reasonably long out.
Yeah. Will do. I also thought about your question about how I would present this to the board, and I would talk to them about the age and the condition of the pipes, their expected useful life, and encourage them to think about setting funds aside to avoid an unpleasant surprise down the road. And again, as I said earlier, would suggest that it's probably not necessary to have all the funding on hand, because some could be borrowed in the future. However, we don't know what the interest rates are going to be in the future, so it might be a good idea to have something set aside.
That sounds good. And we talked yesterday with the folks from Montpelier. A couple of them had gone to their governing bodies and had used mapping and showing the criticality analysis and that sort of thing, and it seemed like it was working well for them to have that information kind of in front of the governing bodies, just to excuse me, just to show that they had backup information, that they weren't just saying this, that there was backup information that would tell you this is how we got here, this is the numbers. And so I think the more you can provide of your backup data, because clearly you have it, that seems to have worked well for the others.
Right. Well, I'm also fortunate in that one of our select board members is the former controller of Dartmouth College, so he's
good.
he's very into, how much do things cost and long-range planning and, replacement cost, all that stuff. So, I'm preaching to the choir. So
well, that's a good thing. That's always positive.
Yeah.
That's a time preaching to the choir is actually an okay thing, because hopefully they're supportive.
Yeah. So, yeah, we were definitely looking forward to getting a handle on all of this, where everything is, what condition it's in, what it's going to cost to replace it, how long it's expected to last. I mean, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're all pretty gung-ho about asset management.
Fabulous. Now you're preaching to my choir. Any questions for Martha?
Well, one other thing, as far as what we've been doing, Allison sent me the O&M guide for small systems, which I looked over, and I talked about that with our operator, and we're just trying to get together a specific plan for our system using that as a model. And we also, the whole select board, met with the Vermont Rural Water Association, and we joined them. And so they're going to be helping us with our water ordinance and, other things down the road. We met with both one of their water experts and one of their wastewater experts. So we're happy to be to get all the assistance that we can. So
great. So are you going to develop an O&M plan, you think? Is that something that you're going to be doing?
Well, I mean, we have O&M manuals for all our sewer components and existing water components, but in terms of, like, how often do we exercise valves and, all those kind of detailed things, which the former owner of the system just was not doing. I mean, I think we have valves that haven't been exercised in 30 years, so.
Yeah, I think if you can get to like an actual plan where you say this is what we're going to do daily, this is what we're going to do weekly, monthly, that will really help you to make sure that things are actually happening, getting done, and you have it on the schedule that you're comfortable with.
Right. Yep. I mean, that's one of our many goals as new water system owners.
And Allison, which guide did you send? Is that one that's specific to Vermont, or which one did you send?
It's actually Washington State's.
Okay, that's the one I was wondering, because I know we showed that one, and I didn't know if that was the one you'd sent or if Vermont had their own.
It seems very straightforward and useful, so.
Yeah, I think it's a really simple one. It's one that we like to share with people because it's real simple. And for a small groundwater system, it works really well. There's, you don't have to make it more complicated. It can be nice and simple, and just you can adjust it over time as you need, but it's, I'm all in favor of simple is better.
Yeah. We have very limited staff, so we need simple.
Yeah. Any other questions or any other comments? Okay. Okay, so what we'll move on to now is I just wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about next steps that you can do, you know, given where you are now. One is we kind of focused on a particular type of asset when we were doing the project through class. And just a reminder that you can use the same process and go through, you know, other classes of assets in your system. You know, if you did valves, you could do meters or you could do pipes. It sounds like many of you are going in that direction to do other classes of assets, but the whole idea was you kind of learn on one kind of asset and then you just apply it to others. And I know several of you talked about water and wastewater both, and that's you know, easily something you can do is apply what you did on water to wastewater. And then if you have any stormwater assets, you can also do it on stormwater assets. And one of the folks yesterday was talking about even expanding their asset management to the entire city. So they were going to do, you know, roads and buildings and parks and all kinds of things. So that's also something that you can do if you have other types of assets, applying that same logic and thought process to all of the assets you manage works really well. So just a reminder, I think some of you already have received the asset management grants from Vermont, but they looks like they'll be having at least one more round of funding for the asset management program. So if you haven't received funding for asset management through the state, you know, that's something you can consider if there's a particular part, excuse me, a particular part of asset management you want to work on. You know, that's a good place to go to try to get some funding. And then another thing you can do, and I think several of you, especially Martha, you talked about this, you can develop a long-term capital plan out of your asset inventory. So once you know what you own and how much longer it's going to last, that really helps you get that long-term view. And one of the reasons I mentioned even looking beyond 20 years is because oftentimes it looks like everything stops at the end of your capital plan and, oh, hey, by the time I get to the end of 20 years, it's all great. And that's not really true because you have other assets that are going to come up in year 21 or year 25 or year 30. So the longer you can look to kind of give that impression that this is something that goes on and on and on, you know, it's just constantly going to be renewed because it's always going to be there. As long as the community is there, you need the water system or the wastewater system. So developing that long-term view is really helpful. And then looking for funding for your capital projects, and this would be different funding than that asset management program that I talked about, where you can look at the SRF program or the CDBG program or the rural development program to try to fund those longer term things like, you know, major pipe replacement or a major treatment plant upgrade. As opposed to something like, you know, Keith talked about funding a couple hydrants a year. You know, that's the kind of funding you would probably take out of your general operating budget. But if you're going to replace, you know, a couple miles of pipe, that's probably something you'll go out to get funding for. I did want to mention the case study write-ups. I know I mentioned them before. We are working on these. There is one up on the screen that's for Bennington that was actually part of round one. We've done quite a bit of work on these. So one of my colleagues has actually been writing this stuff up for me, and she will probably be contacting each of you at some point to fill in the blanks. We're kind of getting them all done, and then she was going to make the phone calls. So it will have pretty much a summary of what you've done, you know, the information that you've shared, that sort of thing. So these are going on, and like I said, there's an example of one that was for Bennington on the screen. And then I did want to give Jim and Allison a chance to say anything if you would like about the funding or about next steps or anything that you would like to talk about.
I just want to say thank you to all of you that participated, especially today. We really appreciate it. We know you're all very busy, especially with all the snow lately. So thank you for taking the time to participate today and for continuing on with asset management. We hope to be offering grants again very soon. We'll keep you up to date on that. If we don't, it will be transitioning to the DWSRF Planning Loan Group, so we'll try to keep everyone up to date on how that goes in the next month or so. Feel free to contact me if you have suggestions on how we should move forward, any adjustments, additional training, etc. I'd like to hear from you.
Hey Heather, were you going to send out a evaluation form?
Oh yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I forgot about that. We did that last time and we forgot about doing this. So Allison, we'll get you the evaluation form, and then if you want to send it out, that would be great. So yes, we will do that.
We might have already done it, Allison. We'll check back. But if you didn't fill one out, she'll send a reminder letter or email. Because the evaluation forms, if you fill those out for us, it's very helpful for us to get funding to continue training in the future. So we'd love to hear your feedback on both how the training went for you, and then also what improvements you'd like to see in the future or additional trainings in the future. So.
And I would just say I'd like to applaud all of you for sticking with it and for applying what you learn to your utility assets. The more you do it, the more you learn about your system and the more you learn how to make adjustments and changes and make it your own thing that best fits your needs. And I think all of you have learned quite a bit about your system going through this process, and that's really what it's about, is just learning and making adjustments, learn some more, make some more adjustments, and over time you just get to a place where it's easier and easier to operate. Doesn't mean it's not time consuming, but it's just easier for you to operate and manage because you know so much more and you know how to do what you do, you know the right time frames to do things, and it hopefully will reduce your burden over time as you learn more about your system, or as you get better mapping that has more of your assets and you don't have to spend as much time looking for them, or as you get a budget that better meets your needs and allows you to make replacements, and as you build in replacements over time so that you're getting your utility assets renewed on a periodic basis, that can really help you. So I'm always looking for stories. If anything happens that you feel really good about, or you hit a really big challenge, please let me know. Feel free to email or call me. I'm always willing to talk asset management with anybody. And we will get these case studies out. I know it's been a little slow, but they are being written, as I said, and there will be a whole collection of them that hopefully will also help share information about what others have done, because collectively in the 2 rounds I think we did just about every asset in a water system, so it is quite a bit of information. Any last thoughts from anybody?
Heather, I would like back those handmade spreadsheets of our valves and pipes
Oh, okay.
that I gave you in the second class.
Okay, I will dig those out.
Ship those back to Ludlow?
Yes, I will do that.
Appreciate it.
And Allison, do you have their address? If not, I can...
Yes.
Okay, if you don't mind sending me their address.
Let's just double check, make sure we have a good physical address for you. Let me pull it up here. Can we just send it to the P.O. Box 359 or?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you all for being on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hope you all have a good day and stay warm and safe out there.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Heather.
Sure. Bye.